We now start with monopoly, which we had left off in the last class.
Morning, sure.
So we have seen how a price discrimination can occur in monopolist. So obviously, for price discrimination to be possible, you have to be in a market situation where you have a monopoly. Otherwise, and of course, it should be insulated market. Otherwise, it is not possible. In this case, a monopolist can charge different prices for different buyers and thereby ensure that he makes a sufficient amount of uh, profit that is greater than if he were in a market where he had a single price. So we see the explanation of the graph where initially the monopolist produced QM. QM is this quantity, and when he was producing QM, obviously his price would be PM. And that is where MC is equal to MR. But if we look at the quantitative output, that will be QC. This is the price at which the quantity would be if it was perfect competition. Okay, so the dead weight loss is the sum of the three areas labeled 1, 2, 3. If we look at 1, 2, 3, because of the monopolist keeping the quantity at QM, he loses this entire triangle. And as a result, this becomes a dead weight loss. It is not benefiting anyone concerned. A second group of consumers is then isolated from the first group and continue to buy QM at PM. So that price QM, they buy at price PM. So this is another group, and this group is, of course, out of the scenario. The new group would buy nothing at the original price of PM. Will buy an amount that would increase total output to QD at a price PD. So if we look at the new group, they would buy nothing if the price was PM. But in case the quantity was increased to QD, they would buy at a price PD, which is lower than PM. The monopoly firm's profit now rises by the area 2, which is the difference between its cost curve and the price charge. So if we look at area 2, this area, this is what now, because of increasing the quantity, he is able to earn this revenue. So this 2 is the gain that he has. The consumer surplus raises by the area labeled 1 and the dead loss falls to the area labeled 3. So consumer surplus goes to 1. Now the consumer benefits by when he increases the quantity. The consumer benefits because he is able to consumer. This goes to the consumer surplus. Okay. And when we look at the 3, this is where the dead loss is occurring. Now we move on to how conflicting forces affect a cartel. We have seen formation of a cartel.
Yes. Again the area 1.
Okay. Area 1 is, of course, what goes on to the. First of all, you have to understand this concept that initially the monopolist keeps the price at QM, which is this. When he price keeps it at QM, he is able to sell at PM because of the demand curve. He cannot charge any other price than QM, and if he keeps the price at QM, he cannot supply more than QM. If he does, then obviously what will happen? The price is going to fall. But if he keeps it at QM, he can charge the price PM. Now, if we compare this with the perfect competition model, we find that the quantity should have been QC, which is the quantity of competitive model, where if you look at the MC is equal to MR is equal to price, that is where it will come. But a monopolist has it less than the price, and therefore, if he keeps it less, he keeps it at QM. However, less than the price, he can also keep at some other price also. So if he keeps it at QM, the price will be PM. Now, if he increases the price to QD, considering that there is a demand and he thinks that he can supply this much quantity easily, if he increases it to QD, obviously his price is going to fall to PD. And when that happens, we find that there is going to be now. Earlier, the dead weight loss was 1, 2, 3 compared with the quantity at perfect competition. But now that he has increased to Q, if he keeps it at QM, this is the dead weight loss. But if he increases it slightly, so there is an incentive for the monopolist also. He can keep it less than the QC, but he cannot keep it more or less. He has to keep it somewhere just a little bit less so that he makes a profit also. The dead weight also is reduced. And of course, his revenue also is increased. So if he keeps it at QD, he is able to gain more customers. Those customers who had now stopped buying, that group comes into the picture and starts buying, and therefore he has this new revenue, QD into PD. And this QD into PD means obviously that area 2 will be the producer surplus, it will go to the producer surplus. Area 1 will go to the consumer surplus. And area 3 becomes the dead weight loss. So that is the only area which remains in the dead weight loss. So dead weight loss is effectively reduced as area 1 and area 2 move towards the consumer and producer surpluses. So they go into their benefit. So if they are benefited by increasing the quantity at QD, which is of course a suitable proposition for a monopolist, where he can have this situation. This is what is explained in this graph. Is that clear, or is there any still some doubt?
Sir,
Yeah?
I'm not getting the yellow dotted line.
Okay. The yellow dotted line is nothing but your marginal revenue, which is of course, and the red one is the demand line or the average revenue. Okay, it is labeled. You see, this is MR.
Yes, sir, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now
Okay,
I can.
now it's clear.
Yeah,
So,
it's clear. Thank
yeah,
you, sir.
fine. Now we have discussed cartels and collusions, and we have seen how they work. Obviously, for cartels and collusions to occur, there are certain conditions. Obviously, there must be a situation where there are only few sellers. If there are many sellers, then cartels are not possible. So it should be a market which has got a few suppliers, which can be counted on your fingers. Because if there are too many, then we know the old adage, too many cooks spoil the broth. So obviously, that will not work because it is already having a fragile nature. And in that, if it is loaded heavily, then it is sure to crack easily. But if there are few, then they can also monitor each other and also control the cartels. So when we look at the factors that affect the cartels, and of course, the result of the cartel is if the cartel is formed and is successfully running, then the result that we see is that it tends to become and act like a monopoly. So that is also the reason why a cartel is formed. They want to gain the advantages of a monopoly, and thereby they intend to create a situation where they are having a lot of benefits. Okay. So conflicting forces which affect the cartel, we will see that there are uh, two graphs in the diagram. One is where there is a market equilibrium, and we know where the market equilibrium will be, and the other will be the firm's equilibrium. So obviously, firm's equilibrium will occur where MC is equal to MR, and the so because it is a monopoly-like situation, we have the MC cutting the average total cost by uh, from below at E. That will be the firm's equilibrium. And as far as the market equilibrium is concerned, where the supply and the demand curve meet, supply is equal to demand, we have the equilibrium at E. Now let us see how these conflicting forces affect the cartel. So initially the market is in competitive equilibrium with price P0 and quantity Q0. So price will be P0 and quantity will be Q0. This is where we have the market equilibrium. And obviously for firms, it will be Q0 where MC is equal to marginal revenue, which should be at least greater than the average cost. So the average total cost is taken and you have a P0. The cartel is formed now. Once the cartel is formed and it enforces a quota on individual firms that are sufficient to reduce the industry's output to Q1. So now they have forced everyone, do not produce Q0, instead produce Q1. Now when that happens, we find that Q1 is substantially less than Q0. So they're not supplying at equilibrium, they're supplying well below the equilibrium. The firm is also forced to get a quota Q1 for itself, and it cannot produce more than Q1. So if it produces Q1, it is able to get a price P1, which is sufficiently higher than P0. This is the increase in price. So the price rises to P1 as a member of the cartel, and as the cartel is enforced. Initially, the individual firm is producing Q0, so it's just covering its total cost at P0. When the cartel restricts the production to the quota, then the firm's profit rises from 0 to the amount sold in the dark blue area. So when it rises, this is the area in which the firm is going to get a increased profit. Earlier, there was no profit. Now they will have a profit. Once the price rises to P1, however, the individual firms would like to increase output to Q2. Since the price has raised to P1, there will be a tendency on the part of individual firms to increase the quantity and gain larger amount of. So the marginal cost is equal to the price set by the cartel. This would allow the firm to earn profits shown by the blue hashed area. But if all firms violate their quota, in this way, the industry output will rise above Q1 and the market price will fall. This is what happens in cartels. If from Q1, if there is a tendency to increase the quantity at Q2, if the individual firm does it, obviously he can sell at price P1 because of the others not producing. But if the entire market changes the quantity beyond Q0, the price is definitely going to fall to a point lower than P0. So we have finished monopoly as well thoroughly. If there is any doubts, you can ask me. Otherwise, we'll be moving on to the other two types of market. What are the other two types of market left to discuss? Anybody can tell us? They are, of course, part of imperfect market. I have a question.
Oligopoly, sir, probably.
Very good. Oligopoly is left to discuss. What else?
Monopolistic.
Monopolistic.
Monopolistic competition.
Excellent. So that these are the two kinds of market left to discuss. Now, can anybody tell me what is monospoonie? What is monospoonie? Never heard of it? Well, as I told you, there are many other kinds of markets which we are not going to study, of course, but you should know. That is why I have told you. Monospoonie is a situation where there is a single seller and a single buyer. This also occurs, and it is known as monospoonie. Okay, and of course, we have many other kinds of markets which is not in the purview of our syllabus, but for general knowledge, we must know. And therefore, we should be aware of these types of market also. They are, of course, peculiar situations, but sometimes they occur for very specialized products and very specialized things. It happens. So we look at oligopoly, which is nothing but where there will be a handful of sellers, a few sellers, and many buyers. And of course, there are certain assumptions that goes with it to make it an oligopoly. Within oligopoly, there is a very specialized kind of oligopoly which has got just two players. That is known as duopoly. So there we have. Interestingly, you will find oligopoly is existing mainly amongst the multinational companies. Multinational companies love to operate in oligopoly so that they are not burdened by the fact that they are a monopoly. And within the oligopoly, they try to create a situation like monopoly. We will see how. Of course, cartel formation, mind you, within countries are also generally prohibited. It is only globally that cartels are formed, whether it is the diamond cartel or the oil cartel. It's possible only globally. Within a country, the country can make a rule and prohibit any kind of collusion and cartels as not encouraging any kind of competition, anti-competition or uh, laws are there to take care of that. So it is not possible to practice it within a country. So we have another kind of market which is known as monopolistic competition. Now, this is a very, very strange situation, although this is practice maximum, because monopolistic competition is what exists in the day-to-day market. Now, if we look at monopolistic competition, this is a very strange thing. Monopoly, we understand. A monopolistic will actually mean monopoly-like. Monopoly-like competition is, there is a conflict between these two words, is there not? Monopoly-like competition, how can there be competition and monopoly both together? So when we think of monopolistic competition, the first thing which comes to mind is the conflicting nature of monopolistic competition. So there has to be competition, and yet there has to be a monopoly. How is this possible also is to be understood through the assumptions that have been taken in monopolistic competition. And these assumptions are, unlike the perfect competition, assumptions which are practically found in the real world, possible in the real world, and therefore monopolistic competition is practiced maximum in the real world. Oligopoly, of course, is also there, especially with large firms, with certain specialized products, which we have discussed, with certain markets that we have, we find that oligopoly can exist. So now let us look at it in slight detail. So when we talk of monopolistic competition, there are certain features or assumptions that we make. There will be a large number of buyer and a large number of seller. And each seller is a price maker or price finder. He makes a price and tries to find whether that price is going to work for him. There will be large number of imperfect substitutes because we have in play here something called product differentiation. That is, you are allowed and able to make certain changes to your product so that it is no more a homogeneous product, but a heterogeneous product. My product is different from yours, although we may be serving the same purpose. The car is a car. If we take the category, the dimensions and the uh, horsepower and the engine power, everything may be the same. Still, one claims that my car is different from yours. Why? Because I've got certain features which you don't have. And he will say, I have certain features which you don't have. So they are substitutes, all right, because whether you buy a car from one or the other, it doesn't make a difference. They both serve the same purpose. Still, these substitutes are imperfect because you will still be thinking, I didn't get that which was with that machine. And therefore, there is imperfect substitution. We have a large number of uninfluencing buyers. We have a large number of buyers who do not influence each other. And in that market, we also have two kinds of buyers, one which is informed and the other which is not informed. Those who are informed probably make a lot of detailed study and try to understand what is what, and the other one is uninformed. There is, of course, free entry in monopolistic competition. There is no restriction, no barriers. If monopolistic competition is there, anybody can come and start production of the product and join the fray. And anybody who desires to leave is free to leave. So there is no entry or exit barrier within this market. Free to come and free to go. If you do not find I am getting sufficient amount of profit, well, bye-bye. If you find that there is a good profit in the certain area, then you join the fray. You will be another one. Now, if we look at the short-run equilibrium and the long-run equilibrium in a monopolistic competition. Now, before we come to that, how is product differentiation achieved in monopolistic competition? By changing the features of the product and also through creating different brands. Different brands also create a difference. Everything may be exactly same. Still, one is a brand A and one is a brand B. There will be buyers for brand A and buyers for brand B because they have their own brand equity. And some people will buy one, some people will buy other. So there will be, again, a monopoly as far as the brand is concerned because the brand is made only by one firm. So that firm has the monopoly. Nobody else is allowed to make that brand because that brand again is patented, registered, and therefore you cannot violate that registration. If you do, you can be punished legally. Yet when it comes to the product, there is competition. So competition occurs at the same time as monopoly is occurring. Monopoly as far as the brand and competition when it comes to the product. So once you come out of the ambit of the brand, you can see for yourself that you can go for. Now coming to the graph. In the graph, we have this dotted line, which is sloped negatively. That is our demand curve. And below this demand curve, we have the marginal revenue, which is the red line, which is also having the same shape as the demand curve, but slightly less. And of course, we have the marginal cost curve, which cuts the marginal revenue from below at a point E, which we have another dotted line, which is going to be extended perpendicular to the x-axis and is plotted to meet the demand curve as well. If it goes below the if it goes on the x-axis, we have the quantity that we need to produce. And if it hits the y-axis, it is the price that we need to set. And of course, if we look at the average variable cost, which meets the marginal, the line. Then we have the light blue area shaded, which is our profit. So in the short run, there will be a normal profit occurring to the area equal to light blue. Of course, the revenue will include both the dark and the light blue. Now, when it comes to the long run, what happens is the long run demand curve shifts inwards. Why does it shift inward? That is from D to DL, mainly because more people join the fray. And when there is an increase in the number of players, the supply increases, which results in the demand curve shifting inwards. And this results in a new equilibrium, which is lower than the earlier equilibrium. So here again, MC is equal to MR, and the average variable cost now has also moved up a little bit because there are more players, and that results in a lesser profit occurring in the long run. We will see the details of this. Obviously, this means that in the long run, the profit increases with increase in number of firms. So as the number of firms increases, the profit increase, because in competitiveness, they start cutting the prices, each other's prices, and obviously, according to some theory, that will go on till it becomes zero, where MC is equal to zero. Others, of course, say that it will will definitely decrease, but it will not go to MC is equal to zero. We'll see that again in detail. So if we look at the short run and the long run equilibrium, obviously, in the short run, the seller makes supernormal profit. In the long run, because of the free entry, the profits are squeezed out. And therefore, we find that in long run, the marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost is also equal to average cost. Obviously, nobody will go below the cost, because then it will come apply, shutdown rule applies. But they will keep on decreasing till they reach the average cost. And that means that you will have a situation where your profit will substantially decrease. So if we look at the normative analysis of monopolistic competition, we find that the long run equilibrium at price AC is equal to MC. So the equilibrium occurs where price is equal to the average cost, which is equal to marginal cost. But the demand curve being downward sloping, average cost is not at its minimum. Therefore, inefficiency and excess capacity are features of monopolistic competition. If you look around, you will find that very often there are many products which are in the showrooms, and there is an excess capacity created, much more than the demand which exists in the market. And this, of course, leads to high inefficiency. With free entry and product differentiation, we find that there is a variety for the consumer. Consumers can go pick different colors, choose different models, and they can buy any product which they want to buy. So we have introduced you to the monopolistic competition, and now we move on to the oligopoly. Okay. If you have any questions on monopolistic competition, you can ask, of course. As we have seen earlier, we will be discussing monopolistic competition also in further details, because this was just a brief introduction to the subject, so that once you have this basic grasp, then we can move on to the detailed theory. Since these markets are important, that is the way we are going to study this. Now, when we come to oligopoly, we have certain assumptions which have been made. If there's any question on monopolistic competition, you are free to ask now. However, if no questions come, then of course I'm going to continue with oligopoly. And we initiate with the discussion with the different features in oligopoly. There are few sellers, so the number of sellers should be such that you can count them on your fingers. They should be interdependent. It should not be that one firm is dependent on the other for its existence. Also, there should be intense rivalry. The famous Coke and Pepsi rivalry we have seen. One advertisement, they talk about something and the other one comes up with a strategy which can only be termed as competitive strategy. One becomes the official sponsor and the other says there is nothing official about it. So they try to clash in the market. Why? Because there is intense rivalry for that position. Strategy, of course, will play a dominant role. So as far as the oligopoly is concerned and monopolistic competition, we will have strategy, which is, of course, what we have told you earlier. What is strategy? It is an effort to gain competitive edge. So when we try to gain an upper hand as far as our rivals are concerned, then that is strategy. The strategy through which we are able to gain upper hand. Of course, there will be barriers to entry in oligopoly. Some could be natural and the others could be strategic. So there cannot be too many players in oligopoly. If these barriers are removed, then we will have monopolistic competition. Now, when we talk of oligopoly in equilibrium in oligopoly, we have not one, but several models which give us equilibrium. First, of course, is the Carnot's model. Then we have the Bertrand model. Then we have the Steckelberg equilibrium. So all these would be studied, of course. They will be part of we'll see how these are different models, mainly because there are different assumptions. We'll also study the kinked demand model. There's a kink in the demand, and this model we'll also discuss. Then we'll look at the cartels and collusions, which are not only possible in monopoly, but also in oligopoly. And then we'll look at two types of price leadership, which can occur in oligopoly. So we start with the equilibrium according to this is the first model where we try to find the oligopoly, and of course we will be following Carnot's principle. Assumptions made by Carnot will apply here. So we'll see what these assumptions are. And we will discuss it through an example of actually a duopoly in a market demand which is faced by two cycle manufacturers. One is Hero and the other is Atlas. So we have the market demand which is faced by both Hero and Atlas, which will be the red line, which is negatively sloped. Now, let us assume that Atlas makes 500 cycles. And of course, Hero makes 700 cycles. Then together they will be supplying to the market. They will have different prices also. So when we talk of Carnot's equilibrium, we'll come back to the graph. Let us look at the various assumptions. So within Carnot's, we have a special case of duopoly where we have two sellers. Now, it is assumed by Carnot's that these players are passive. Passive means that they do not react to what the other fellow does. So if one fellow does something, the other fellow will not react. Second assumption is that they must be identical firms. Their cost, marginal cost, and other things, other features which are there in a firm, they are same. They are not different. You cannot have another marginal cost for firm A and another for firm B if they are to be discussed under Carnot's equilibrium. And the marginal cost is identical. So the marginal cost for both firms is same, constant, and assumed to be equal to 0. The marginal cost is equal to 0. That is the assumption with which we proceed in Carnot's equilibrium. Okay. Now this is the demand equation in Carnot's equilibrium for the product Q. So price is equal to 12 minus Q. This is the demand line which is faced by both the firms. So if the total supply that is possible in this market is capital Q, then obviously this capital Q will be equal to the quantity produced by individual firms. Is this clear? So individual firms produce quantity small q1 and small q2, which is equal to capital Q, which is the quantity which is to be supplied to the market. So for example, if the market demand is 1200 bicycles, then Q1 could produce say 600 bicycles and Q2 could also produce 600 bicycles. Then together they will be producing 1200 bicycles. Or Q1 could produce 400, then Q2 will have to produce 800 bicycles so that 1200 supply can be made. So together they are equal to capital Q. Now, if we substitute this capital Q with small q's, the same equation or demand line changes to price is equal to 12 minus small q1 minus small q2. Why? Because it is minus q, and initially we had q1 plus q2 in bracket. When we open the bracket, the negative sign outside translates to both of them. Now, what is total revenue? Total revenue we know is price into quantity. So when it comes to first firm, we will treat the equation for each firm. When it comes to the first firm, the price is equal to 12 minus Q1 minus Q2 for the first firm. And of course, the quantity that the first firm is producing is Q1. So price into quantity, Q1 into P, and P is equal to 12 minus Q1 minus Q2. So Q1 into 12 minus Q2 minus Q1. This is my total revenue. And if I open the bracket, this becomes 12Q1 minus Q2 minus Q1 square. This is my total revenue. When it comes to the marginal revenue, we increase the quantity by 1. So Q1 becomes 2Q1 and we divide the whole thing by Q1. So Q1 and Q1 cancel. So we are left with 12 minus Q2 minus 2Q1. Okay, try to digest this and we will continue with this in the next class because I think, yeah, the time is over and this requires a little bit of digestion on your part, but it is not difficult. It is easy. I'll also try and send you the YouTube link where this is explained in detail, but I will do that in the next class. Then we will see how this Carnot's equilibrium will lead to determination of the quantity and price. Okay, so let me first of all take down the attendance. Once the attendance is there, then of course you are free to join your next class. Or is it, I have seen the wrong time. It is going to be 12:15, no? So I'm sorry, we'll continue. But yes, I have downloaded the attendance, so that is task is done. Now we move on to this Carnot's equilibrium. If anything is not clear, any doubts are there in what has been explained so far, you are free to ask. So now we have total revenue and we have marginal revenue. Assumptions in Carnot's equilibrium was, as we have seen earlier, that the marginal cost is equal to 0. That was the assumption. So when we look at the equation, MR is equal to MC, because that is where the equilibrium lies. No? MR is equal to MC. We have MR, which we have determined, and we have MC. MC is equal to 0. So 0 is equal to 12 minus Q2 minus 2Q1. So when we try to look for Q1, we move Q1 to the left-hand side where the 0 was there. So minus 2Q1 becomes plus 2Q1 when you move it in an equation. And 2Q1 will be equal to 12 minus Q square. Rather Q2 square. In fact, it is just Q2. I'm sorry, not square. Because they have not been able to write it properly, it looks like square. It will be Q2. Now Q1 is equal to 12 minus Q2, the whole thing divided by 2, because it was 2Q1, so 2 moves to the other side. It means that it was multiplication here, it becomes division on the other side of the equation. So we have the first reaction curve for form Q1. Now similarly, we will have a reaction curve for the second form. Obviously, in that case, Q2 will be on the left-hand side, and you will have 12 minus Q1, the whole divided by 2. That is the reaction form of the second form. Q2 is equal to 12 minus Q1, the whole divided by 2. Now, if we try to solve these two simultaneous equations, assuming them to be simultaneous equation, we can solve it for Q1 and Q2. And if we do that, we find that Q1 is equal to 4 and Q2 is also equal to 4. If we look at it graphically, that is the point of intersection of the reaction curves. And this is where the Carnot's equilibrium lies. So Q1 is 4, 4 and Q2 is 4. Now, if we substitute this in the first equation, so 12 minus 4 plus 4, which is 8. 12 minus 8. So you get the price is also equal to 4. And the total quantity that the market demands is 8. So from this initial demand equation, we can also calculate the price and the quantity demanded of the market. Of course, individual firms would be supplying 4 for each. Okay. Now, this is a question which I request you to note down and try to solve it using the Carnot's equilibrium. The same formula. Okay. This question is, of course, from the book, and we'll try to note it down and solve it. So everybody just note down the question. Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. हाँ, एकदम मंडे को है, सारा कुछ, सारा डिटेल्स है, हमें मिल गया है, and I'll be joining in time. हाँ, 11 बजे मैं रहूंगा सर. हाँ हाँ. थैंक यू सर. वो तो आपका मेल और वो सब आया हुआ है. फिर मुझे कोई दिक्कत होगी तो मैं बात करूंगा सर. हाँ हाँ, मैं कर लूंगा सर. थैंक यू सर. हाँ, इसमें कोई, अब तो माइक्रोसॉफ्ट टीम भी थोड़ा बहुत आ गया है, उसी से क्लास चल रहा है अभी. हाँ, बस हाँ, और कुछ नहीं करना होता है. सही बात है. नहीं, हम तो हाँ हाँ ठीक है सर. बस क्लास ही चल रहा है अभी, फिर बात करता हूँ आपसे. हाँ हाँ हाँ, हम लोग सर. राइट, थैंक यू. राइट. Yeah, please note down. There are 2 fast food outlets located in a town, but separated from each other by a distance of 10 kilometers. One of their fast food moving item is the vegetable roll with the center filling which is supplied by a wholesaler manufacturer. Each roll uses one ball of center filling, which is priced at ₹4 by the manufacturer. The fast food outlet buy these balls, and with about 10 minutes of labor, the vegetable roll is produced. The labor rate is ₹6 for an hour. Okay, so you have to A, derive the cost function faced by each outlet. B, assume the 2 are Carnot's players, how much will each be selling and at what price? So this is the question. And the case I have already given you. This is a case study actually with two questions where you will be using the Carnot's equilibrium. So I repeat the question. There are two fast food outlets located in a town, but separated from each other by a distance of 10 kilometers. One of their fast moving item is the vegetable roll with a center filling, which is supplied by a wholesale manufacturer. Each roll uses one ball of center filling, which is priced at rupees 4 by the manufacturer. The fast food outlet buys these balls, and with about 10 minutes of labor, the vegetable roll is produced. The labor rate is rupees 6 for an hour. So you have to derive the cost function faced by each outlet, and assuming that the two are Carnot's player, how much will each be selling and at what price? So what is the quantity of the individual firms and what will be the price at which they will be selling? This is what you have to find out. Any doubts, any queries, please ask.
So,
Otherwise, yeah.
so could you please click a snap of that question and send it on the WhatsApp group? You have
Okay,
repeated 2 times, but I'm still unable to, gather all the information. Could you please do that?
yeah, I will do it. No problem. In fact, I will do it right away. Of course, when I click a picture and send you, there will be another question A, B, and C. You do not have to attempt B right now. That will be attempted once we have taught you how Bertrand equilibriums work. Okay, so that is the only problem or that you will have to ignore question B as of now. Okay.
Sure, sir.
Okay, so you do not have to answer question B. I have sent it. Please check your WhatsApp. You would have received it by now. Only B you do not have to attempt. Only A and C.